I wasn't supposed to be home for another 6 days. The plan was simple: wrap up the last leg of my pipeline inspection gig in North Dakota, drive slow through Colorado, maybe stop and fish a day or two before heading back to Texas. But bad weather fast-tracked everything, and by Wednesday morning I was rolling down the familiar 2-lane road that wound through Cedar Hills and grazing land toward my ranch. 60 acres apiece, trees, animals, tools, no neighbors, no noise, and best of all, no HOA. I'd bought the land 3 years ago, specifically to escape the ridiculous control of suburban communities. After what happened with my last house where a neighbor once fined me for parking my truck facing the wrong way, I swore I'd never let an HOA near me again. I crested the last hill as the sun dipped below the ridge. Golden light spilled across the pasture, and there it was, my ranch house. Tin roof, wraparound porch, single oak tree out front. Except something was off. The porch light was on. Then I noticed more lights inside: kitchen, upstairs bedroom, living room. I hit the brakes and sat there for a moment, engine idling. No one was supposed to be there. I lived alone. The only person with a spare key was my cousin, and she was in Arizona with her newborn. My hands instinctively tensed on the wheel. I eased the truck down the gravel drive and parked behind the barn, cutting the engine. No sense in announcing myself. I'd been gone for 2 months. If someone was squatting or worse stealing, I wasn't about to give them a head start. I grabbed my sidearm from the glove box. Legal, registered. I kept it with me when traveling, and this time I was glad I had. Moving through the shadows, I circled the house quietly. Laughter, I heard it coming from inside. Then the unmistakable flicker of a television and a toddler's high-pitched giggle. What in God's name? Through the living room window, I saw a teenage boy sprawled on my couch, feet up, controller in hand, immersed in a video game. A small child toddled across my rug with a juice box in hand. In the kitchen, a man stirred something on the stove. I didn't recognize any of them. This wasn't a break-in, this was occupancy. And then she appeared, striding down my hallway like she owned the place. Blonde hair frizzed up in a messy bun, wearing leopard print pajamas, phone in one hand, barking orders with the other. Karen. Just any Karen. Karen Atwell, president of the Ridgewood Valley Homeowners Association. I'd met her once, briefly, at a local town council meeting where she was ranting about people abandoning valuable land and dragging down property values. She'd tried to get my land included in the HOA's expansion plan 2 years ago, and I shot it down in writing. Twice. Yet here she was, walking around my house like it was her weekend cabin. I knocked loud. The sudden noise startled the boy. On the couch, he dropped the controller. The toddler screamed. Seconds later, the front door cracked open, and Karen appeared, half panicked, half defiant. "Jackson," she said, eyes wide. You're not supposed to be here yet." "Clearly," I said coldly. "What are you doing in my house?" She opened the door slightly wider, trying to mask the panic behind a neighborly smile. "Listen, it's not what it looks like, really. You've been gone for months. The board thought the property was what neglected. We voted to." I cut her off. "You voted to break into my home." "It wasn't breaking in," she snapped. "We had a locksmith. The property appeared abandoned, and as HOA president, I exercised temporary occupancy rights for community safety." My voice hardened. "Karen, this land isn't part of your HOA. It never has been." "That's debatable," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Some maps." "Get out of my house." Her face twisted. "I don't like your tone. You're being aggressive. You're trespassing." Then, without warning, she pulled out her phone and dialed. "I'm calling 911, she said, loud enough for her family to hear. "This man is armed, unstable, and threatening my children." I took a step back, stunned. "You're calling the cops on me? You came here with a weapon," she shrieked. "You're scaring my family." In that moment, I realized something bone-deep and ugly. She wasn't just panicked. She was manipulating the narrative, twisting the facts before what could be recorded, painting herself as the victim before anyone else could speak. And now the sirens were coming. The sirens shattered the silence, echoing off the hills like war drums. I stood motionless in the dust, arms loose at my sides, my holstered firearm untouched. My heart pounded not from fear, but disbelief. I had returned to my own home, only to find it occupied by strangers and myself cast as the intruder. Red and blue lights danced across the trees as 2 sheriff's cruisers tore up my gravel drive. Their tires screeched as they stopped. Both deputies emerged fast, hands hovering near their weapons. Karen stood on my porch, arms flailing, voice shrill. "That's him," he broke in. "He's armed. He threatened us." The taller of the 2 deputies, a middle-aged man with sun-worn skin and calm eyes, glanced at me. "Double quotes, sir," he said firmly. "Keep your hands where we can see them." "They're up," I replied, lifting them slowly. "My name's Jackson Ward. I live here. I have ID on paperwork." "Step forward slowly." I obeyed, voice even. "That woman is Karen Atwell. I don't know how she got inside, but she and her family are trespassing. This is my ranch. I returned early from a trip and found them living in my home." The deputy took my ID and ranch DID, eyes flicking over them with practiced efficiency. His partner radioed in the information, while Karen descended the porch, tears now streaming down her cheeks fake as a $3 bill. He's lying, she hissed. He abandoned the property. The HOA board declared it a hazard, so we moved in to secure it. I'm the president of Ridgewood Valley. I'm not part of Ridgewood Valley, I said flatly. That's not entirely true, she snapped, desperation leaking through her polished tone. There's an annexation clause you've been trying for years. I interrupted, and I've rejected it every time. In writing, filed with the county clerk. The deputy held up a hand, silencing us both. Ma'am, we'll need to see your identification as well. Karen's eyes darted toward the house. Her husband stepped halfway out the door, baby in arms, face drawn and pale. Behind him, the teenage boy peered from the living room, still clutching the game controller. Where's the key you used to enter the home? The younger deputy asked her. We had the locks changed, Karen admitted softly. The house was unmaintained. We voted, the senior officer exhaled. Long and slow, ma'am. I don't care what you voted on. This property is not within your HOA's jurisdiction. You have no legal claim to it, and no authority to change locks or occupy it. But the community center was full, she sputtered. There was an electrical fire in our neighborhood last month. We needed somewhere to go. I acted for the safety of my family. I stepped forward. I have security cameras, trail cams out back. They'll show the date and time your family were first entered the house. That footage is automatically backed up to the cloud. Sheriff's office can request it any time. Karen's face dropped. She knew she'd overplayed her hand. The deputy handed back my ID and deed. Mr. Ward, you're within your rights. Do you want to press trespassing charges? I paused. I could say yes, could push this woman into a holding cell and let her HOA empire crumble while her neighbors whispered about her fall. But part of me wanted something deeper than punishment. I wanted exposure. I'd like her removed, I said, voice steady, and I'll be filing a formal complaint. But no arrest for now. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. Her lip quivered, as if expecting pity. But there was none. The deputies gave her 1 hour to vacate. Her husband started packing immediately. Silent, defeated, the teen vanished inside. Karen, however, stood frozen, rage bubbling behind her eyes. You think this is over, she whispered as the deputies turned away. You humiliated me, made me look like a criminal. You did that to yourself, I replied. You'll regret crossing me, Jackson. I gave a small, humorless laugh. You already broke into my home. What else can you do? Find my chickens for clucking too loud. She stormed off without a word. As the cruisers pulled away, the weight settled in. This wasn't just about my house, it was about power and who had the right to wield it. Karen had spent years trying to claim what wasn't hers. She thought absence meant abandonment, that silence meant surrender. She was wrong. I was back, and this time, I wasn't just protecting my land, I was ready to push back. Karen didn't waste time licking her wounds. 3 days after the sheriff escorted her off my ranch, the retaliation began. At first, it was petty. My mailbox, steel bolted and custom welded, was pried open and stuffed with rotting food. The next morning I found a citation taped to my front gate from the Ridgewood Valley HOA, claiming I was operating an unregistered livestock enclosure. I laughed until I saw the second envelope, then the third. Noise complaints, zoning violations, even a bizarre claim that my weather vane was a visual hazard to passing aircraft. Ridiculous on the surface, except the paper trail was real. It meant Karen wasn't just fuming behind closed doors. She was orchestrating a full-blown campaign, and she still had the HOA board on her leash. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't just a guy with a ranch. Before I moved to Texas, I worked in municipal planning back in Colorado Springs. I knew bureaucracy. I knew building codes, zoning loopholes, and public land use laws better than she ever would. But I didn't want to strike back blindly. I wanted precision, so I started investigating. Late one night, I drove down to the county records office, flashlight in hand, and pulled every public document tied to Ridgewood Valley's HOA. Their bylaws, their meeting minutes, land annexation, proposals, they were all there. Karen's fingerprints were everywhere, pushing boundaries, bending rules, writing fines like candy wrappers. And then I found it, a quiet little document filed last year, a proposed boundary expansion that included my land, not yet approved, but written up as if it were a done deal. Maps showed her dream, my ranch cut up into lots, a street grid paved over pastures, a cul-de-sac right where my barn stood. She hadn't just squatted in my house out of desperation. She was testing the water. She wanted to absorb my land legally or otherwise, and that little stunt with her family was the opening move. My absence gave her the illusion of opportunity, and now that I was back, her strategy had changed. Pressure me, find me, box me in until I either submitted or sold. Classic power play. But I didn't get my hands dirty just yet. Instead, I went to work. I called up Dave Weller, an old buddy from my city planning days now, the assistant DA in our county. I laid it all out. The break-in, the fraudulent citations, the forged HOA vote Karen claimed gave her access to my home. Dave wasn't just interested, he was furious. We dug deeper. Turns out several residents in Ridgewood Valley had also complained about Karen over the past year. Most of their grievances had been ignored, silenced by threats of fines or community discipline. One elderly couple had even been threatened with foreclosure for planting tomatoes in their front yard. But now that Karen had escalated her war to include someone outside her fiefdom, someone with connections, it changed everything. We built a case. Meanwhile, Karen kept pushing. She had a crew block the only public access road to my ranch with concrete barriers, claiming safety concerns due to recent wildlife incidents. She issued another round of fines, this time for excessive dusk lighting from my porch bulbs and invasive scent pollution from the fertilizer on my pasture. It would have been laughably if it weren't so deliberate. She wasn't trying to win, she was trying to exhaust me. But what she didn't know was that I'd already filed a cease and desist letter through the county attorney's office, and I wasn't going to fight her on her terms. I was going to take the whole board down at once. The next HOA meeting was announced via newsletter, open to all residents. Guest speakers welcome, IRS, VPD. Then I went shopping. Big poster boards, full-color zoning maps, blown-up images of her family lounging on my couch, and copies of the sheriff's report all neatly compiled into one airtight presentation. Let her try to lie when the whole neighborhood watched. Let her try to squirm out of this when the DA himself showed up in the back row with a notebook. Karen wanted a war of attrition. I was bringing an airstrike. The Ridgewood Valley HOA meeting was held in the community center's rec room, a beige, over-air-conditioned box with cheap folding chairs and passive-aggressive signs about water usage. The usual crowd filtered in, retirees with clipboards, soccer moms with Starbucks, a few reluctant husbands dragged in like prisoners of war. Karen stood at the front, her signature-printed scarf knotted around her neck like a badge of honor. Her voice rang sharp as she spoke to the room. Tonight we discuss upcoming beautification measures, expanded compliance zones, and a final motion regarding underutilized land on the Ridgewood perimeter. That was my cue. I rose from the back row, carrying my trifold presentation board and a thumb drive with slides. I didn't say a word, just walked to the side of the projector, connected the USB, and clicked to the first slide. A crisp satellite map filled the wall. In bold red, the Ridgewood Valley HOA boundary. Next slide. My property line highlighted in bright green, clearly outside the HOA by nearly half a mile. Whispers rippled through the room. Excuse me, Karen snapped, her voice forced calm. This is a private meeting for I was invited. As a landowner directly affected by your annexation proposal, I have a right to speak. You're not part of this community. Exactly, I said, and yet somehow, your family was living in my house 2 weeks ago. Gasps. I clicked again. Photos lit up the projector. Karen's husband on my porch, her son at my TV, her toddler running through my living room with sticky hands. A few heads turned to her, mouths parted. One old man near the front muttered, "That's your kid, isn't it, Karen?" Karen's face turned crimson. This is a smear campaign. He's manipulating. Another slide. The sheriff's report, enlarged for all to see. According to county records, I said, Karen falsely reported me as an armed intruder on my own property. She also authorized a locksmith to break into my home under the false claim of HOA authority, despite the property not being within any governing boundaries. I paused for breath, then delivered the knockout. I've filed criminal trespass and defamation complaints, and the assistant district attorney is investigating HOA board abuse of power, including coerced votes, unlawful fines, and annexation attempts without consent. Silence gripped the room like a vice. Karen's voice cracked. You're lying. This is a setup. But then a voice from the audience interrupted. I never voted on annexing his land, said an older woman. You said he'd abandoned it, that we were protecting the neighborhood. You lied. Another stood. You fined me $500 for my daughter's swing set. Told me it violated aesthetic standards. I checked the guidelines. Nothing about swings. More residents chimed in. What had been a reign of fear began to fracture right in front of her. Karen's veneer crumbled. Her voice wavered between pleading and defensive. I did what was best for the community. No, I said calmly. You did what was best for your control. That was the end of her presidency. Within days, Karen Atwell was formally removed from the HOA board by an emergency vote. The DA opened a civil investigation into her misuse of HOA authority and fraudulent annexation efforts. The citations issued against me were not only dropped, they became part of the case, and I wasn't done. I used my contacts to propose a zoning ordinance amendment and airtight clause preventing any homeowners association from attempting annexation of agricultural or independent properties without unanimous written consent and full county review. It passed unanimously. A week later, I sat on my porch again, boots up, coffee in hand. The sun warmed the hills, and the dogs barked at the squirrels chasing each other through the oak tree across the valley. A moving truck pulled away from Karen's house. She was gone. One neighbor, an older man with a John Deere hat, pulled into my drive with a pie and a handshake. Thank you, he said simply. We didn't know how to fight her, but you did. I nodded. All I wanted was to come home to peace. And you gave the rest of us a piece of that too. He drove off, and I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet settle. Karen came. After my home she left with nothing, and Ridgewood Valley, it would never be ruled by fear again.